Hi, everybody. Welcome to Kissa Kahani. And today we have with us Anand Neelakantan. Anand, a best-selling author, has carved a unique space for himself within the flourishing domain of mythological fiction. He's the man who tells the stories that actually no one does. His work is quintessentially what if genre that takes a classically accepted telling of a story and then shakes it down to reveal a whole new story. His books bring out a very different side of the familiar characters and offers readers a perspective that is neither common nor expected, but at the same time completely believable. And there lies the unique craft of Anand, whose books sell even before he writes them and whose name evokes a sense of expectation even among the most seasoned readers. His long list of books include his debut work, Asura, Tale of the Vanquished, which was followed by Ajaya, The Roll of Dice, Ajaya, Rise of Kali, the former being based on, of course, Ramayana, and the last two based on Mahabharata. Anand Neelakantan is also the author of the Bahubali trilogy, the prequel to S.S. Rajamouli's movie. The first book in the series, The Rise of Sivagami, was released on 15th March 2017 and continues to be the #1 bestseller across charts. The book was on Amazon list of top 5 bestsellers for 2017. Anand's sixth book, Vanara, The Legend of Bali, Sugriv, and Tara, was published by Penguin Random House and is a bestseller. DAR Films and KR Movies have announced that they have won the film adoption rights and will be producing a multilingual film on Vanara. Anand Neelakantan's seventh book, Chaturanga, the second book in the Bahubali trilogy series, was released amidst the pandemic on 6th August 2020, which continues to be the #1 bestseller across charts. His eighth book, and an interesting heading to it, the very extremely most naughty Asura Tales for Kids, was released on 28th September 2020. I think he must be the only prolific author who releases books during pandemic. Congratulations, Anand. Within a week after the release of the book, it is the bestseller amongst categories. Anand, I take great pleasure and it's an honor to welcome you to Kissa Kahani at Mythological.
Thank you, Utkarsh, for inviting me. And actually, my next book also is coming next month. The
Please.
Bahubali. I am closing the Bahubali trilogy, the third
Oh,
book.
wow. I think you've made very good use of the pandemic, if I may add.
Pandemic or no pandemic, I keep writing.
That's
The
true.
writer
That's
is
true.
always keeps you social distancing from people.
That's good. I must add it here that it's a pleasure talking to you, Anand. And I think I've shared a platform with you a couple of times.
Many times.
And with or without topic, we somehow managed to talk. So hopefully today also it'll be as interesting, which it always is, even at any level that one speaks to. So just to begin is that, how does the world of mythology look from where you sit, from the way you watch these? For example, as an author or as a teller of tales of those stories, which are not usually heard, in the books, for example, those of Asuras, Ravan, and so on. How do you perceive these stories? Because people are busy telling stories of, the devas and, the heroes. You're telling stories of none of these. So,
Uh, See, there is one thing. It is easy and it is difficult also telling it from the other side. One thing, it adds to a freshness when you tell it from Ravana's perspective or Duryodhana's perspective. The issue is it goes against what people have been learning for many years, especially after the advent of television. Television actually killed most of the countertelling.
I'm going to underline that statement.
It caters to the, even though I have written more for television than novel, I would have written around 500 hours of episodes. Television caters to the lowest common denominator because it has to, see, I'm not dissing television. Uh, it has to serve, it is like when you make a compromise on your writing so that nobody is offended and everything is accepted. So it comes to only one accepted form of storytelling. And if I am writing in Hindi, it will cater to the Hindi market. Whereas when you write a book, it again, it opens to a different kind of, it is catering to a different kind of people across the country. So I get the freedom to bring in tales from various parts of the country, put folk narratives into that. So if you see, 90% of Indian literature is yet to be written. They are still there in the oral format.
I agree.
Very few have been written down, and there is something very important here, because what is written for many centuries, the writing was cornered by some people in the society, some communities and everything. The other people didn't have the opportunity to write, or they were not allowed to write because of the social reasons. I'm not going into the whys and all those
Sure,
things.
sure. Yeah, we all
It's a
understand.
fact. So what happens? What is that narrative? That only will be there in the written narrative. What is advantageous for them? And any literature, any history is a tool of propaganda since the advent of humanity. It's nothing new. Maybe the method of propaganda changes from bards singing around, the Sudas and Magadas singing around, to people getting 2 rupee per tweet. It can keep changing. But the things are, the more things change, the more they remain the same.
True, true, true.
So it is like when we talk about the written literature, whether it is in Sanskrit or any classical language of India, what we see is only a small group of people writing it and manipulating perhaps, or it may be with manipulation, need not be always bad also. It could be for good reasons also, or what they, with good intent also, it could have been done. But it assumes a color. So when you bring in the folk narratives to it, which is actually more popular, it might not be, it is like talking, it is like telling, many people have this misunderstanding that Hindi is the national language. Hindi, the maximum number of people speak, but they are not the majority.
True.
Isn't it? Around 35 to 40% speak Hindi, the rest 60% is shared between another 20-25 languages, and around 300 or some people say 3,000 dialects. But if you take the number of literature in all these things, it will be much more than what you find in this 30 or 35. Similarly, the Sanskritized or the allied literature in any classical language, the 8 classical languages of India, is only a minuscule part, and the majority of the stories are oral.
True.
What I did was, I drew many of the inspirations from these oral stories. Not that I claim to have a lot of knowledge about it, but whatever I encountered with it, I used it to tell it in English. It has been told for many generations, nothing new. Telling Ravan story is not a new thing. So many people have done before me, and so many will do after me also. Telling Duryodhana's even Bhasa in Sanskrit itself.
Absolutely. I was about to say that.
From Muribanga, and even he even changed the war, Panjaratra.
Absolutely.
Without war, he made a...
He changed the rules of Natya Shastra also, right? He changed the rules of Natya Shastra. So
changed the rules of everything. He was ultimate rebel writer.
absolutely.
So when I was writing mythology, I had taken a few part. Maybe I just scratched the surface of the oral literature. Oral literature is rebellious. Why? Because they need not. These were from word of mouth, and they changed as per the time. So you find suddenly, and nowadays what is happening is that many of the oral literatures are getting written down, and once it is written down, it goes into some kind of comma, or it becomes dead. So now it cannot change.
Right, right.
Stone or set in paper. One example, perhaps when you talk to Aziz, Dr. Aziz Tarivana, who has done research on it from Wayanad tribals, we were discussing this. I also have encountered some of the tales which he had encountered.
Absolutely.
That. But I, as a part of my writing, not only at Wayanad, but other places in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, parts of Maharashtra, I've heard many of these tales. Some with the help of some translators and other things, because all languages I cannot know, 3-4 languages I can speak. So what you find is that, say 40-50 years ago, they started writing it down, many of this, and their growth stopped. So one example is in some Ramayanas in Wayanad, they talk about coffee estate and all, Ravan having coffee estate and all. Why? Because it was evolving when coffee.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
Coffee
absolutely,
estate.
absolutely. And there's an episode, where Ram is disappointed with Sita because she doesn't make good coffee.
Yeah. So it was evolving accordingly,
True,
and
true.
Yakshagana and all, what they do is they change subtly the story depending on the village they are playing, and they will be addressing the village issues, that
Okay.
particular issues. So you find this lot in the folk theater and even in many of the classical theaters also. When it was written, they had taken this advantage of that
Hmm.
period.
True,
Like for
true.
example, in Malayalam, the classical art form Ottantullal, Kunjan Nambiar's Ottantullal, 17th century, it's absolutely hilarious and it's absolutely, you cannot write it like that now without getting,
Into trouble.
means he stays in the Bhakti era, but it is like he uses the characters to rip apart the conventional, what do you call, the Brahminical thought or the elite thought, whatever you call.
Mhm.
Like one example is Kalyana Saugandhigam. In Kalyana Saugandhigam, what he does is he makes Hanuman ask all the questions what I have asked in Ajaya. He makes Hanuman ask all the questions to Bhima,
Oh my
saying
God.
that I am an old man and I cannot move. So he says, I am Bhima. Oh, then Hanuman starts sarcastic. It's all sarcasm. Maybe the Malayalis got the sarcasm from all these things. So Kuchanambiyar is highly sarcastic. So he says, you are that fellow, the fat fellow. The fat fellow, what is the use of a fat fellow? Maximum we can do is make you a pillar. Pillar to some building. Because you were standing like a pillar when they were stripping Draupadi. You are that fellow.
Wow.
So
I
it
see.
is like asking it on the face, using a character like Hanuman.
Right. But you know, these dialogues actually in a way echo the thought process of the milieu, right? The
Correct.
social, it's exactly how somebody must have said it at some point of time, saying, what's the big deal of a strong man who
Uh,
can't defend his wife? And see how it's come in the performance.
so he's asking it, no, you're a
Yeah,
pillar, you're standing like a
absolutely.
pillar, you're standing like this. That's the only use you have. You eat and stand like this. What is
No, that's interesting. I agree with you.
So it is, and it is written in beautiful poetry in a sarcastic tone, and it is performed. Man, just give me one example. There are thousands of them.
Right, right, right.
So this is a tradition with which I write. There are other ways of writing also. Successfully, people have done that. So there is no right or wrong way. Another way to do it is perhaps. See, what I did was I stripped out all the magic. Not for TV. TV I added magic. Now I'm writing for films. I'm adding a lot of magic into that because visually that is appealing to bring uh, fantasy, magic, and all those things. But when I was writing book, I was writing for a particular audience. I was writing, thinking that whether it came out like that, that's a different thing.
Mhm.
I was thinking that the book should be read by people who are thinking. It is not just for entertainment.
True.
I have to raise questions in people's mind. So I used rationality. It is all my takes are all rational, in the sense that there are no gods. Not that I'm against it or anything. Book purpose, all Asura, Roll of the Dice, Rise of Kali, Vanara, Bahubali is a different thing. It's a commercial book. The other four books are meant to be raising questions. Another method of doing it is, which could have been done, which many people have successfully done, is all, and all hats off to them, is to uh, bring a sense of pride on real or imaginary achievements of our ancestors. So this is like saying we had atom bombs or we have missiles. So what happens is Indians have this inferiority complex, rightfully so also, I will say, because last 200, 300 years, we have missed out totally on the scientific boom. We have a handful of scientists because we stopped questioning. I will blame religion only, we stopped questioning. So what happened is science became the purview of Europe, more or less. Every civilization goes through ups and downs. It happened that in the human history, the last 200 or 250 years since the industrial revolution, or the last 50 or 70 years, when we were busy chasing 5-year plans and other things, the world went forward. And how many inventions we can think of from India? Our rational thing went away and we started revealing in the imaginary glory. This is what happens that we dealt with in Asura also. The success, any tale is the tale of the victor, but also the delusion of the vanquished.
Yeah. I like that. Delusion of the vanquished. That's a
Delusion
very
of the
nice
vanquished. So
statement.
whatever we are indulging now is a delusion of the vanquished.
True.
as an India. So my books, I try to reflect the society. How to cater. So we know, everyone knows, most of the writers know, if they are intelligent enough, they know this is a delusion of, we are living in a delusional era. We have the delusion of the vanquished. So we ascribe, there are many achievements for India, no doubt. For the contemporary society, we were very advanced, say, in the Gupta period or in the Maurya period or in the south during Chola period and all. At that time, we might have been the advance for that society, because when Cholas were building majestic temples, I was seeing the series Last Kingdom. England is like, would not be even like what Andamans is now. It's that developed. But suddenly you find that, or China at that period, India at that period, even Arabia at that period, Europe came very late, was a latecomer. Now they glorify talking about the great Greek civilization and all those things. But contemporary, if you think, and if you just take the map and see, these are all city, municipality level civilizations. You really see, taking the three great civilizations of that time, Persia, India, and China, especially India and China, the scale and scope of it is huge. They are continent-side civilizations with huge, covering 70% of the population. But it went back. Both the countries went out. Europeans came because they started questioning their religion. They had developed a scientific outlook, and it happened that India fell on their lap, and many other colonies fell on their lap, and they built it upon it. And hats off to them. And whatever, including whatever we are having now, is
yes.
We owe it to the Europe, whether we like it or not, including the democracy, the language which we are using, whatever we say, many of the inventions, we owe it to them. But so what we are doing, the other side, is to ascribe it, all these things that, we had all this in our Veda time. Chinese also tell that, but now Chinese have stopped telling it because they already are they are breathing down the neck of Europe. So they are gaining more confidence. They have stopped telling it. We still lack in confidence, so we had to invent an atom bomb in Mahabharata, where people roam around in horse-drawn chariots with nuclear missiles. I don't know why even the irony is not striking to the people who read it. Writers can write anything, but the people who read it, why the irony does not strike, I cannot understand. But that is another way of writing it, no doubt.
I think the audience just got a taste of the famous Malayali sarcasm, in the last response. So thank you, Anand, for saying exactly what you said. And I like the way you don't mince words about certain things. And I definitely love the idea of, how people on horse-drawn chariots were moving around with nuclear missiles. If I ever use that line, I'll ascribe it to you, Anand. Trust me, I will do that. Just moving on here from here, like talking about chariots and nuclear missiles. For many, Ramayana and Mahabharata is, they're stories, right? But somehow, what's these stories? What have these epics really made relevant for you to kind of delve, in these epics? I mean, your first set of books were all epics, right? So what was in it for you that you wanted to bring out, for people?
See, I have always believed these epics evolve. So every era has written its own Ramayana or Mahabharata, depending on that circumstances. So for me, it was like, I always loved these stories. Still, I love these stories. I wanted to look at it from this era. If I am looking at it as a, say, after maybe it is a kind of arrogance you can call, but or delusion. Maybe 500 years hence, somebody looks back at this era, they will find that, okay, here, that time also people were thinking like Basa. Now we think back and see, I'm not comparing anyway with Basa or anything, but they should not feel like we were only writing about, as I said, glorification, but also holding a mirror, that realistic. Because what worried me always, even now which worried me, I keep writing on my columns, regular columns, Indian Express and other things, about it is the lack of scientific temper, especially what I am seeing it now among people. Without science, because Indian philosophy itself is based on science. Science in the sense scientific approach. I'm not saying science. These are two different things. The base of Upanishad itself is questioning. Gita itself is a debate. Whether you agree it or not, it's a debate. It's an unending debate. There is no commandments. suddenly we find, I think, Bhakti era, I told it in many places, Bhakti era gave us a lot of good things. It gave beautiful poetry, it gave us beautiful sculptures and art, but it somehow stagnated and blunted our intellect.
Mm.
So suddenly we find a generation, especially maybe it is social engineering, maybe it is because of the social media. Every day I get fantastic WhatsApp forwards. When it comes from my uncles and aunts, I'm not worried that much. I laugh, but when it comes from my nephews and
Yes,
then it makes me worry.
I agree. That's a very good observation. You're right about that.
Whereas I sometimes find my uncles and aunts are more rational than many of the, because people are believing in anything and everything. So I thought that I have to bring this trend I was observing earlier itself. And but whereas my father was a very traditional person who taught me Ramayana and Mahabharata in a very traditional way,
Mhm.
he lived a very traditional conservative life, which ironically in India is a very liberal life. If
Okay.
you see, if you follow uh, Indian culture in a very conservative manner, many of it are very liberal,
Okay.
more liberal than modern. It might sound like an oxymoron, but in India, conservatism means what? Conservatism means he is more toward to the roots, which is acceptance of everything.
Mm. Okay.
Which is not saying I am superior than you and I have a great culture or anything like that, or it is not saying I had all the knowledge. It is about questioning. It's about the way they teach Upanishads, not by hearting, but if you go to an actual guru and teach, they say you reject everything. Even Buddha was teaching like that. You don't believe anything because Buddha, I have told you, or some books are told, or someone has said it. You have to test it through your intellect and your reasoning and understand.
Right.
Maybe your intellect and your reasoning is not capable of understanding it. It doesn't matter. Your reality is your reality, right? Instead of just without using it, maybe you reach at a wrong conclusion, but at least your conclusion. Rather
Correct.
than just
I
copying
absolutely
your
agree with that. Yeah.
So this was what I was taught. And suddenly what happened is when I was 15 or 16 or I think so, the Mahabharata, TV Ramayana and Mahabharata happened. So suddenly it was beautiful, it was good drama for that period, but all the nuances died away, whatever I had learned. And most of my what do you call friends were not fortunate enough to have that kind of an upbringing. They believed this is the Ramayana, and
Yeah.
not all are interested in it. 99% of people are not interested in it, and it might not matter also. But what happens is it slowly changed India.
True.
It slowly changed. India changed from the inclusive, accepting India of centuries, which is one of the redeeming factors of India, despite many of its many other so-called negative factors. Even that went away. So we became a medieval Semitic religion with none of the virtues of it.
I like that.
Because a medieval Semitic religion hated everything, the others. The Crusades, they hated others, but at least they had a love for their own. We
Yeah.
have neither.
Yeah.
We
I
have
agree.
only hate for others and ourselves, which is like all the problems of medieval Semitic religion, none of the virtues of it.
True.
We
That's
have
so
taken
well
the
said.
garbage of Europe and put it on our head and calling it our culture.
That's very well observed. I kind of, I really appreciate what you just said. It's very well said.
So I thought rationality has to be brought back,
Hmm.
because without rationality also there is no bhakti,
Hmm.
or there is no thing. Even art has to be rational. Rational in the sense, rational need not be rejection. I'm not talking about the Marxian rational where the only thing, that is another religion if you ask. The only thing rational for them is their book. How is it different from any other religion?
Right.
Everything is seen through the Marxian lens. So
Right.
it becomes another religion. It's another Semitic religion, another Judaic religion in its worst. So, with again, as I said, with none of the compassion or other things associated with the earlier Judaic religion. So we got a uh, negative of it, or we got a opposite end of it with the same kind of problems. So we have false pride on imaginary achievements with none of the compassion, and we have not solved the real issues of our culture like casteism. So we are casteist Earlier we were not bigots, but we were only castes. Now we are castes bigots, which is a dangerous thing.
I agree with
So,
you.
it is not that I write 4 books, it's going to change, but it is
True.
only to for my conscience I write it. That's all. Maybe 5 people read it. It's good enough. At least
No, trust me, Anand, many more than 5 read it. I mean, I'm sure you know about that. Many more than 5 read it. Just moving on from the epics, you worked extensively on, and I for one know that, your knowledge on the folklore of Kerala is huge. So I have a very, if I can use a wicked question here, how have these stories and characters, and often the wicked and the devious ones influenced your writing?
they are all the folk tales are my inspiration. I told it many places. See the very character of folk tales like Onam itself is a rebellious festival. No?
Absolutely.
It's totally rebellious festival. It's a take on what you call, even the way the hero is portrayed itself is has that.
You must delve on this, Anand. I'm not letting you go without you delve in on the subject of Onam, please.
See, Onam perhaps is the only festival in India which celebrates, it's on your face actually. It celebrates an Asura, coming of an Asura. And funny thing is that it's a minuscule part of Kerala always celebrated it as the Vamana Jayanti, but they too also celebrated it as the coming of Mahabali. So what happens in India, any conflicts gets resolved through stories. At least it used to. Now the stories create riots. That's a separate thing. But earlier it used to get resolved through stories. So how it comes in, how the Vamana Purana itself dealt with it is a very beautiful example of how India dealt with conflicts. Mahabali is this Asura who had ruled righteously, and the Onam song which goes, which may have been rewritten in the last century because the Malayalam looks very new, but still there are references of this song in the earlier versions also, where it is perceived that Mahabali's kingdom was one thing where there was equality, irrespective of your caste, creed, or religion, whether you are male or female. There was no infanticide. There was literacy. There was no black market. These are the words used. So it is like a society's aspiration is that. And imagine this is talked in a society, very casteist society, which it was. Kerala changed in the last 70, 80 years after Sri Narayana Guru and other social reformers. The Kerala, which Vivekananda saw 100 years back, is a madhouse. So from it changed in the last 100 years only, all these many things happened. But it slowly achieved all those things. It has perhaps one of the lowest infant mortality rate in the world, which is an aspiration in this song. Perhaps in the comparable to European countries, better than America. It's 6 per 1,000, I think, which is better than US. US is around 9 or 10. So a poorer country, because this is the aspiration of the people. Literacy, all these things is achieved in the last 60, 70 years, because this is the aspiration of the people. And Mahabali it is not Ram Rajya, it is a Mahabali Rajya. But they don't spare even the Mahabali. He is a comical character. All the mimicry is a modern day folklore. If you see mimicry, stage shows and all, a big pot-bellied guy comes. Mahabali could not have been a pot-bellied guy because he defeated Indra and he was a warrior and all. But he's a huge pot-bellied guy, a jovial guy, like a Santa Claus. He comes and he dances and sings. And he is a hero. And people are no problem. People are not burning buses for that. People laugh at it. So that is why perhaps most of the cartoonists from Shankar onwards, most of them perhaps came from Kerala because so many of them, Kutti, so many of them.
Yes.
Sarcasm which is imbibed in that. So even they don't spare the so-called hero. As my writing also, if you see, there is a lot of sarcasm in it. Even though I write Asura or Ajaya or Vanara, there is an element of underlying tone of sarcasm in that. Like words like this country doesn't lack gods. We have plenty of them. It lack only men. All these things are meant for sarcasm.
Yes. Interesting. I mean, it reflects on, the way you write, the way you speak. I mean, if somebody's read the book, okay, and not seen you, he will recognize while we talk to you, saying, yeah, I think I can match these two absolutely well. Finally, just you've now ventured into films, and that's a completely a different ball game. You wrote a prequel to a movie which was released first. So, what's your experience of taking on this hugely successful? Bahubali was like absolutely made box office records, and nobody had seen that kind of success. And so, how what's your experience of taking this successful Bahubali franchisee and making it your own? How what was your experience about this?
Yeah, I was given full freedom. I was called by Mr. Rajamouli while the film was going on. He had read Asura and he had liked it, and he had called me to make a backstory of it.
Mhm.
So what they promised and what they gave me was absolute freedom. I took only 3 characters from the film. Then around 40 characters I created. So what I did was I played the same thing. I made Mahishmati to a reflection of modern day India.
Mhm.
Then I mimicked the many of the characters which we see around. So it is those who observe it will see, otherwise they'll see a fantasy picture. But it's a huge sarcastic social commentary
Mhm.
on. There are godmen. There are so it's a huge world. There are pirates. So there are words like pirate telling. Piracy is an old profession. It says piracy is an old profession, but not as profitable as religion. More honorable though. So this
Good one.
pirate is talking. So the pirate is a anti-hero in it. So pirate is talking. I'm using this word. Pirate is one of the world's oldest profession, as old as religion, but more
Not as profitable.
not as profitable, as honorable as religion.
Right.
So I use it as for a social commentary, and then of course you have to tell a beautiful story before. Without that, all this will fall flat.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that.
You make a story, so you can read it as a fiction, you can read it as a satire, you can read it as a comedy, you can read it as an adventure. I think that is how the folk tellers tell the tale. No, they
True.
have this
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mine is very folkish. It's not a very classical, elevating language because I don't know the language. I am learning English. I don't think in English even now. I learned English very late. So none of us spoke. Forget the family. None in the village spoke English. So it's like it's a very alien language for me. And even now I get confused because of this language. Because it's like you're all black people and suddenly you say it is not fair. I said, what is not fair? That itself is racist. You're using totally alien language. To call somebody black, is it fair or not? This kind of questions I get.
And you say English is an alien language for you, Anand.
No, it is an alien language. Just imagine this. You had a warm welcome. You are sweltering in 35-degree and 100% humidity in or in Mumbai, and you want to give a warm welcome to him. You have to give a very cold welcome to him. Language. What sort of language?
It is a weird language. I will have to agree with you on that.
Just imagine somebody sweating in Mumbai heat or Kochi, whatever, tropical heat, sweating, and you are going to give him a warm welcome. So the language itself, bright and sunny day is gloomy for us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a very great idea.
We celebrate monsoon, we celebrate rain, and rain is gloomy for them. So how do you deal with this language? I get stuck at this place.
Right.
Because I am thinking in Malayalam and translating it. Maybe now I am doing it very fast because
Okay.
of 10 books, almost now 10 books. Now 2 books are coming, 10 books, and so many things I have written, columns and other things. My translation process has become better. Even now, when I am talking, I am thinking in Malayalam and translating it very fast. That's all.
You're doing a great job then. Right. Right. Anand, I mean, it's always a pleasure talking to you. And I think after talking to you, one really feels nice and light. And I'm sure the audience has enjoyed this discussion. So thank you very much, Anand, for being a part of Mythological. And let me assure you, just as much as I've enjoyed, everybody who's listening is enjoying the same. Thank you very much, Anand, for being a part of this. So friends, we are back. Anand is back with us. He had to leave because of some other engagement, but I know there are many people who had questions for Anand. So obviously he's come back after that engagement. This is the advantage of technology and Zoom seminars and webinars. So you see, he just traveled, I don't know where, and he's back here with us. So Anand, thank you very much. That really was interesting. But let me just take the first question. This is somebody who says that, how have you dealt with opposition to your views? Because quite a bit of your writing is contrarian in its approach. And have you received any flack for voicing your opinion, which is quite contrarian?
Not much. Not much. You will be there always. Anything you write, you say it is the night, somebody will dispute it is day. So that is there always. But otherwise, I not face that kind of issue because of the very nature of what we write. There are so many versions, and people who are who have some knowledge about this, they know that there are multiple versions available. Every Ramayana is different, every Mahabharata is different, and there are so many versions, so many contradictions, and that adds to the beauty of it actually. So I not face that kind of flag. Unless somebody manufactures it just for the sake of manufacturing it, I don't think it should not be a problem.
Right. No, it's just that we're living in times where even a single opinion which is not palatable to a certain segment, they're up in arms. So I just thought, since anyway you have different heroes in your books, so I thought just in case that's happening with you. But, good for you.
Maybe it has to do with, I write from all sides. Book is one thing, but I have, if you really ask me, I have written more screenplays than books. Even though through books people know me, but I had written Siya Ke Ram, Bahabali Hanuman, Chakravarti Ashoka. So I have written from either side of the story with a 360-degree perspective. So what I bring is perspective. I don't write with an agenda to prove this or that or anything. And just showing light from various sides. That's all.
Right. Yes, there are some more questions. One second. Somebody's asking, what made you look at the Asuras so closely?
I thought that the television and the last 30-40 years rendering made it so black and white that I wanted to bring back the balance. That is the truth to be told. It's not that I have any special affinity towards Asuras or Devas. I'm a storyteller.
Right.
But what happened is the way in which the stories were told in my childhood, the traditional way the stories were told, there was no vilification of, at least from where I come from, there was no vilification. Each character is given their space. So Ravana has his own space. There are temples for Duryodhana. It doesn't mean Krishna is disrespected or Ram is disrespected or anything like that. It was a holistic perspective, but suddenly what happened, when the television Ramayanas came and other things came, it became totally one-sided. Maybe because it comes from a separate culture where over the years the entire narratives changed. So we don't lynch Ravan in the south.
Right, I like that.
I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but it's like a news. When you come, it's a shock to you. It's not that we consider Ravan, anybody considers Ravan as God or anything like that. It's stories are told in the traditional way only. Ravan is the anti-hero of Ramayana. There's no doubt about that. But anti-hero doesn't mean he's evil, because there is no concept of evil in Indian thought.
Yeah,
there is no concept of good or evil. That's a very westernized, as I explained in the speech, it's a very westernized concept. It comes from the Abrahamic religion, which is the way of life, which is a way of looking at things.
Right.
Nothing superior or inferior about anything. But as I said, it is all about, here it is all about karma and karmabala. And suddenly we started using that lens to see this. And ascribing villain, somebody as villain, somebody as hero. Even from the Bhakti era it started. But if you go back, originally many scholars think Mahabharata itself was written as from the Kauravas viewpoint. And slowly it changed. To bring balance, it changed. So if you really see, there is no victor. We are stopping the stories where it is convenient, and making it like a fairy tale from the West. These are not fairy tales. Fairy tales will have a fairy tale ending. But Ramayana or Mahabharata doesn't have a fairy tale ending. It has a
No.
life ending.
Correct.
It doesn't end at Pattabhisheka, where Ram, Lakshman, Sita, Hanuman, and the group family photo. It doesn't end there. It continues like life.
True.
But we stop it there and then proclaim that this lost. It's not like that. Both Rama and Ravana, they are used to teach the effects of karma and karmadala, the action,
Completely.
choices of action, and it's a relentless pursuit of that, rather than good, bad, and all those things. So I was trying to bring back the balance.
True. Interesting. One more question. What, in your opinion, is a myth that best represents our society today?
There is no, myth is a very misleading word, actually, if you ask. We have myths, but what we are talking about, the Puranas, these are not something which are dead. They are still the works in progress. There cannot be a myth. Myth is something which is told of a long dead culture. Like Greek myth we can talk, Egyptian myth we can talk. There is no Indian myth. It's not because whatever is told is historical and these people used to roam around with atom bombs or anything like that. It is because they are still works in progress. They are living now. So whether it is Ramayana or Mahabharata, that finds relevance every minute in every society, and it keeps on reinventing itself. So every era produces its own Ramayana and Mahabharata, and it changes from the original. It keeps evolving. Only living things evolve. Dead things remain myth. These are not dead things. So Mahabharata will be always relevant.
True, I agree with you. And it's let's face it, it's hunting ground for many of the modern authors today to get threads or myths or events or instances from the Mahabharata. Completely agree on that. Another question here: how important were stories when you heard as a child in helping you write your novels today? This is an interesting question, because I think what is happening is that the nuclear families today, are probably giving away that culture of storytelling, and the technology, the screen world that we have all been exposed to is probably cutting away that whole concept of listening to stories. So how much would that be an influence in your life as somebody else?
I don't think storytelling has stopped. Storytelling has evolved. It is for us to use the technology, leverage the technology, which I am trying to do. Tell it through TV, tell it through films. Books need not be the only medium of telling stories. I heard it through Kathakali, I heard it through Ottandullal, I heard it through the various temple art forms from my parents, from my relatives, from the neighbors. That was one way. That was the only way available at that time, and they are very elegant, evolved forms of storytelling, because it went through so many years of evolution, centuries of evolution. But now, these might not be the correct medium for the faster life. Nobody is going to see a 4-day, 8-hour into or 4-hour into 4-day show of Kathakali to see the story. I don't think anybody will have the patience for that. So what we are doing, we are trying to do is leverage what we have, because we can reach so many people now. So it need not be, it is nothing that it should be only the grandparent who should tell the story. Now we have got the technology, use films to tell the story, use Netflix to tell the story. That is how our this thing has evolved. When the films came, our great filmmakers, all of them used the film to tell the same Raja Harishchandra or that people became chief ministers in many states by telling these stories. So we know how to utilize this, and it did not be always through the grandfather.
True, I agree with you. One final question that somebody's asked is, how different is fantasy from mythology in terms of, since you've been in both the worlds, you've written fantasy, you've written mythology, how different are these two worlds in terms of writing?
Mythology or Puranas are fantasy of a different era. They are all fantasy literature only. See, let us don't once you ascribe historicity to it, it brings it down. Because any culture which is vibrant will have fantasy literature. See America now, it is flooded with fantasy literature. See what Disney did in the last century. He created, because we can see how India would have been when it was at its peak, where the storytellers were giving big dreams to dream. We can look at America and see that now. Look at USA and see that now. They are creating this kind of, see the kind of Marvel comics they are creating. And just think back, we were creating the same kind of things. You have to think it like that. Rather than stupidly believing it is all historic things. They need not be. Like it is like after 500 years, people will say it's like Americans believing. At that time, America would have been conquered by someone or something like that. Maybe Cambodia or Colombia, Cambodia or Peru or somebody would have conquered America. And at that time, they will be, once civilization gets conquered, instead of this confident way of storytelling, they start fantasizing. That is where the fantasy comes. Then they will say, actually in New York, actually in Gotham City, this Batman was there, or what do you call it, Superman was there, and they are our gods. It need not be. So fantasy, as such, there is no difference between both as far as I am concerned. Whatever it is storytelling. You can use high fantasy to convey a lot of messages and beautiful stories. Lord of the Ring also conveys a lot of things. It is no way inferior to it. Or Harry Potter also conveys. Same way our Puranas also conveys. I don't get offended saying that these are all the same. These are all the achievement of human brain which helps us to aspire more, dream more confidently, think about more. First you have to dream, and this fantasy literature gives us the legs to stand on. That is how you free your mind and imagination. And the more confident we become as a civilization or regain our confidence, we will tell more and more fantastic stories and fantasy stories. We will create stories which will be regarded as Puranas 2000 years hence. Maybe who knows, Bahubali will become a god.
Amen to that. One last question before we let you go. Do you think, somebody said, do you think we no longer can have new myths or folktales?
We are having, no, every day we are creating it. We are too nearer to it, but it will get created. Even our freedom struggle will become a myth. After some time, we are too near it to 70 years is nothing. Even the stories of Christ took 200, 300 years. Stories of Buddha to become God, it took 300 years, 400 years. Maybe after 300 years, he might become God, or someone else might become God. We don't know what has history in store for us, but we will be creating that. We will be creating lots of stories and fantasies out of it. That is how we are. We are great storytellers, Indians. We are good liars.
We sure are. Do I see a hint of sarcasm there, or do I take it in absolute terms?
Both. We are good liars. We are imaginative liars.
That I'll take it in absolute terms. Right. So one last question. I thought that was the last question, but I think there are too many questions. And I told you have to come back. Somebody says the old folk tales have characters that are great, but in films we have heroes and villains only. How can you use the new medium to tell old stories?
That is because in films we are imitating the Hollywood and their style of storytelling, which they are also evolving now. But if you see all the Western stories, folk tales and all, some are grim. I'm not saying it is not, but mostly it is told, even they try to protect the kids by telling stories without violence. You try to write something for the US audience or UK audience. They don't want kids to know violence and other things, and kids grow up and take a gun and shoot in the school. Whereas we teach Kali drinking the blood, and it doesn't matter. So we try to imitate them. And the Bollywood or other things mostly tell the stories in the way the film developed there. We are trying to follow the same grammar. But actually we should not. We should follow the grammar of Indian way of storytelling, which I think now Koreans are slowly doing it. They are doing it in their ancient way.
Right.
Korean films and all. And to an extent, Malayalam films also tell it in a slightly different way, not going by the very flat way of storytelling.
Right. I think that's what we can take today. If there are any more questions, please, guys, send it to us. We will have them sent to Anand, and we'll take those. We'll share the answers with you. Once again, Anand, thank you very much for coming back and taking questions. And we wish you very best. I have been seeing one of those teaser campaign saying coming soon, and I'm seriously waiting for that to come. And wish you all the best for your Chaturanga and the book which is coming. So thank you very much. And once again, Anand, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. I have enjoyed every moment of speaking to you, be it as a co-panelist, or be it as a moderator, or be it as a panelist. I never lose this opportunity to speak to you. So thank you once again, Anand, and it sure was a pleasure.